Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Aging at Altitude series. Thank you so much for joining us for our Lunchtime Conversations webinar today. My name is Lindsay Haynes, and I will be moderating today's session. And so I just wanted to take the opportunity to let you know that whether you're on a tablet, a phone, or your computer, at any point today during the presentation, you are able to submit questions for our speaker to address at the end. So if you just hover over your Zoom screen on the bottom, you'll see a little Q&A box. You can insert your question there, or you can send us a chat as well. So our speaker today will present for about 35 to 40 minutes, and then we'll take the last 15 to 20 minutes for questions at that time. So that being said, our speaker today is presenting the topic of brain health. We have the pleasure to hear from Dr. Ilene Naomi Rusk. She is a functional brain health consultant with the Brain and Behavior Clinic. She'll be presenting on neuroplasticity and how to reduce stress and improve your brain health. So that being said, I will turn it over to Dr. Rusk to get us started.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. Is everyone able to hear me?
Sounds great.
Good. Thanks for the feedback. Well, I'm really happy to be here today. I love Aging at Altitude. I think it's an amazing community event, and I'm actually honored that you asked me, so thank you. And thank you for the introduction, Lindsay. I'm a neurobehavioral consultant. I'm also a trauma psychotherapist, and I'm director of the Healthy Brain program at the Brain and Behavior Clinic. It's an integrative approach to brain health and recovery. I am here to talk to you for about 45 minutes, and then I'm going to stop the formal presentation and take questions from our community. So I am actually not able to change my slides right now. So I need to figure out why I can't do that. Okay, that's great. That's great.
So we'll just have you take
I
this
got it.
time to share your screen too, Dr. Rusk, and then we'll be able to see your presentation.
Oh, okay, so you can't see the presentation yet. Let's start again then. Sorry about the delay. I'm sure I'm not the first.
You are not the first, and you won't be the last.
I bet that's true. So let me just pull up, close this and pull up my, and share. Hold on. Whoops. And now you will be able to see my screen, which will be really good. Oops, I'll pull it over a little bit. Here you go. How's that?
Looks perfect.
Good, and that's why it didn't work. Oh, it actually still doesn't work. That's okay, it works now. Okay, great. So this is my first slide. I was presenting just my introduction really and giving you a sense of who I am as director of the Healthy Brain program. And this is a big reason why I'm here today. This is the scope of the problem. I'm actually going to frame this whole conversation around cognitive decline, cognitive strengths, and the health of the nervous system. So these are some of the facts and figures from the CDC. It's a rather recent publication from the CDC showing that Alzheimer's disease is the 6th leading cause of death in the US. And you may have heard other speakers speaking about this. It's really, we hear so much about coronavirus, as we should. And I think that coronavirus is really going to cause another slew of difficulties with cognition and mental health issues. it turns out that Alzheimer's disease is actually the first leading cause of death in the UK. And 5.7 million in the US are already diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And this is expected to increase considerably by the year 2060 to up to 14 million people. And there's so much we can do for prevention. And that's a big reason why I'm here today, because I feel like very hopeful and very positive about an integrative approach. The problem now is that there's not a systematic approach to deal with this problem. In that, single targeted drug strategies, i.e. the silver bullet, one cure fits all, doesn't really work for complex chronic illness like Alzheimer's disease. And I think the solution is an integrative and functional medicine approach that we can use looking at root causes for why there is cognitive decline and Alzheimer's. And even though mental illness isn't the scope of my conversation, I have the same beliefs about root causes in mental illness. So the title of the talk has neuroplasticity in it. And what is neuroplasticity? Well, we have a nervous system that is very flexible and a brain indeed that is very flexible. And we can use the power of neuroplasticity and the flexibility of our nervous system to take care of our brain health and work towards preventing cognitive decline and staying emotionally healthy. Neuroplasticity is what we need for brain health. We used to think that once neurons died and connections ceased, there was no way to captivate that back. And it turns out that is just not true. There are many ways to engage change in the nervous system, very positive ways. And as this refers to the brain's ability to make new connections throughout the lifespan, it means that we are always interpreting, adapting, and changing based upon information that we have from our internal environments, like our heart rate, our health of our stomach, our mood. Those are internal experiences, as well as external experiences, like the relationships that we're in, the type of job that we're in, or the career that we're in, the climate that we find ourselves in. Those are all external things that also affect neuroplasticity. And on to the neuro words. I'm going to share with you some neuro words that are relevant. And one way to grow neuroplasticity is to learn things that are new every single day and to challenge ourselves with novelty and difficult things, not things that stress us too much, as you'll hear later in the talk, but things that engage us, that we learn from. And so stay with me. Neurogenesis is the generation of new neurons, the actual birth of new neurons. And that happens in adulthood, not just with babies. So it's important to know that this potential lies within us all the time. Neuroplasticity. Well, I've shared one of the definitions with you today, and I'm including it here again for the sake of repetition. Repetition is great for learning and new learning. It's the ability of nerves in the brain to change and grow new connections, to make new connections throughout the lifespan. Positive neuroplasticity. I've divided neuroplasticity into positive neuroplasticity and negative neuroplasticity. Positive neuroplasticity is when neurons and pathways of neurons grow in a positive way. In positive ways, we want to change, like we learn new things, we exercise better, we're able to pay more attention. Those are positive ways in which neurons grow. But we also have negative neuroplasticity, as I call it. And that's when nerves or pathways, circuits in the brain die off. The obvious ways in which that happens are stroke, where there's a big interference in connection between brain regions, traumatic brain injury, and things like Alzheimer's disease, when there's a buildup of plaques and tangles. But negative neuroplasticity also comes from habits that do not support the brain's health and balance. I'll be speaking about positive and negative neuroplasticity today. And finally, there's synaptic pruning. And with synaptic pruning, pruning is just what, if you're a gardener, you know that when you have little branches that you no longer need on a tree, you snip them off, you prune them off because they're no longer needed. Same thing with what the brain does. Babies' brains have about 100 billion neurons, but adults have fewer neurons than that. So we basically lose neurons as we age. Why? We begin our lives, and this is so beautiful, it's so touching to me. We begin our lives wired for absolutely everything. And depending upon our external environment and our internal environment, neurons fade away depending upon their use or their disuse. So it's good to keep that in mind because this is the same principle that can protect us from cognitive decline and Alzheimer's. To engage our brains maximally and to keep our nervous systems healthy. And I'll be explaining more about that as we move on through the talk today. And I'll be taking questions later on if you have any. So this is your first challenge of the day. Remember, I told you that it's really good to have new learning that's challenging every day. Well, this is a little test. I'm actually teasing you to test your memory, but remember, neurogenesis is the growth of new neurons. Synaptic pruning is use it or lose it. And positive neuroplasticity are some of the ways in which we can work with stress, we can work with our cognition, and we can change our brain health in a positive way. You can always review, I think they'll post these slides in the talk, so you can always go over some of the talks that you hear today if you thought that they were interesting. So let me first start with positive neuroplasticity. These are some of the things that you can do to support positive neuroplasticity. You can have calm moments in your day. That does not mean you stay calm throughout the day. That would not be how we're wired. We're wired to feel all of it. Moving, exercising, nourishing your body, having cognitive fitness as opposed to just physical fitness, sleeping well, being creative and engaged, coming up with new ideas, making meaningful art, playing music, and maybe, and mostly, super importantly, connecting to other people in a meaningful way that feels good. And now I'm going to go over what I call the 5 S's of negative neuroplasticity. And unfortunately, this past year has allowed us to become a little more familiar with some of these negative neuroplasticity features and ways to work with them. First of all, being solitary and lonely. Having low social contact is not good for brain health or physical health. I'm sure you've heard that. We're all working to change that in the face of this pandemic. Sadness and grief, unremitting, is not good for brain health. It actually shrinks brain regions like the hippocampus. Being stagnant and not moving is another way to shrink and not use certain brain regions and connect body with brain. Sleeping, if we have insomnia, even short amounts of insomnia change our reaction time, our memory, and I'll talk more about that later on in the talk as well. And then of course, stress. And you know, we don't always know we're experiencing stress when we're experiencing it, but it increases stress hormones like cortisol, and it can be very damaging for brain tissue and create patterns, neuroplastic patterns that don't make us really happy or feel socially connected. So that gives you a sense of positive and neuroplasticity. And now I'm going to go on to, I'll see if I can go on to it. Hold on. Sometimes my computer clicker isn't working, so I'll use a different way. So these are the 3 phases of stress. Stress is good. Stress impacts our body in a good way if it's fleeting and short and adaptive, right? Eustress is a kind of stress that feels exciting, it's motivating, and it builds our performance, which is just wonderful. Hormesis, so That would be like flying in a hot air balloon if you're afraid of heights. You go up in the hot air balloon, you see this incredible landscape. You're in awe. You're like, oh, I'm not so afraid of heights. This is really beautiful. I think I'm going to skydive. That would be eustress. Hormesis is a process of conditioning and adaptation with low levels of stress. And it can happen to muscles. For example, with exercise, there's a stress that's good for us, right? We stress, we might feel a little soreness, our muscle grows, we do it again. So it's a slow process of increasing capacity, increasing resilience, again, facing into stress. And distress is what we often associate with the word stress. It's suffering, and it can look like hypoarousal, low arousal, or being very aroused, like afraid or anxious. And I'll talk more about that later. So this is what the threat response looks like in the brain. This is the neuroanatomy of a threat response. And I'm showing it to you because I really want you to see certain brain regions that I'm going to be talking about today. Unfortunately, I don't have a highlighter, but you can see the amygdala right there. It's the small almond-shaped part of the brain. There's one on each side, one in each hemisphere. And the amygdala is the threat detector. And information loops from the amygdala and other relevant brain regions, as you could see, including memory centers. And then it circles back to the prefrontal cortex. And the cortex assesses and analyzes and helps the amygdala see the event as not as scary or not as threatening. And this is really important because what the news has done to us over the last year is even if we're not conscious of it, and most of us are, especially in this very educated audience, we have been looping in a threat response if we've been watching the news a lot, we've been watching the numbers a lot, and we've been circling around this fear. So now it's a good time to notice our threat system and begin to calm it and take care of it. This is a perfect example of a fight or flight response. Our nervous system reacts when we're afraid to fleeing a situation, fighting a situation, or freezing in a situation that is very scary. But a stress response is adaptive. It helps us stay safe. It helps us stay alive. It keeps strengthening us, as I said before. So this stress response is very normal and very quantified in the scientific literature. The key is to come down from that stress response and get a sense of relief in the body and relief in the nervous system. If we need to get away from a chasing dog that has big fangs, then we run, we hide in a shelter, the dog passes, and we feel a sigh of relief. And that sigh of relief is a very important part of the nervous system that gets stimulated, that tells the breath, the few breath, that we feel relief and that we feel safe. Normal stress response, adaptive. But some stressors just don't go away. And of course, COVID is one of those stressors. Difficult relationships that cause us a lot of stress don't go away. And there are other life circumstances that don't go away. So to have compassion for those and begin to know that we do have some agency, we do have some ability to alter those. And I'm including this slide because it's important to see not everything that I'm showing you, like heartburn and weakened immune system, high blood pressure. The point of this slide, though, is look at the body. The entire body is affected by stress, and so is the brain. It can increase persistent stress, can increase your risk for cardiac, immune, autoimmune, and other illnesses. And it can also increase your risk for mild cognitive impairment, that's MCI, dementia, and even mental illness. Often we learn things from adverse childhood experiences. Our unconscious and our bodies learn things that set us up in a certain way. So taking care of our stress is very important. Oops. Great. Stress can cause persistent inflammation in the body, And it changes the structure and function of memory and emotional centers in the brain. Some of those brain regions I showed you before, the prefrontal cortex, the hippocampus, and the amygdala. And I think you're familiar with those brain regions. The hippocampus is a memory storage area, very implicated in Alzheimer's disease. And the amygdala is that threat alarm bell system that acts quickly to detect threat in our environments. With repeated stress, the blood-brain barrier becomes leaky, and circulating proteins and hormones sometimes get into the brain. And chronic stress also increases blood sugar, and that impairs brain function, especially if you're sensitive to sugars. Chronic stress affects sleep, and I'll be speaking about some of these things later on in the talk. And again, if you have questions, just write them down, and I'm happy to answer them after. Something that's good to know about our brains and our nervous system. It's an adaptive mechanism, but I think I've already shared with you that we tend to be negativity detectors more than positivity detectors. It takes some work and in order to become positivity detectors, but our brains are like Velcro for negativity and Teflon for positivity. This past year, our threat detection system has been working really hard. And I think it's just good to know that we have this disposition. It's a disposition that keeps us safe, but sometimes it's too engaged. So there are ways to calm down that system and build our positivity bias. We've had a lot of uncertainty in the last year. Uncertainty is very hard on brains and nervous systems. It could be seen as a challenging stress that's good for us, or persistent uncertainty can be very unsettling and very anxiety producing for us. So it's important to know that we don't have to stay stuck. And a good and simple exercise for this is just to notice something in your environment, even right now, to notice something that's pleasant in your environment. And you could see I'm looking around my environment. I'm looking at a beautiful picture of an artist, and it's soothing for me. And I'm just to spend just a few seconds focusing on the good and taking in the experience of appreciating something good can be a way to counteract that tendency to focus just on the negative. I think that I have convinced you that both threat and safety live in our nervous systems, and we have the capacity to detect both. And it's important to cultivate that capacity to sense when we feel safe, to sense when we don't. And it's also easy to lose that capacity. We have, and I think many of you will be familiar with this term, but stress is not necessarily a bad thing. Stress can be a good thing. Depends on how we perceive it very often, but stress can make us stronger. Again, perception is important. But we can divide the nervous system into two distinct parts. And it's more complex than this, but for the sake of this conversation, the sympathetic nervous system engages us. It engages us in a fight or flight response. It increases our heart rate. We become ready to run away from that dog with big fangs. And our parasympathetic nervous system allows us to rest after a stressor. Tell ourselves, geez, that was really scary, but now I'm really fine. And it's important to know that we have the capacity to rest and digest as part of our nervous system. And it's the vagus nerve, a very long and wandering nerve, a cranial nerve, that allows us to create some of that calm and relaxation in the body and in the brain. It's also very linked to our social engagement system. So being with other people can stimulate a portion of the vagus nerve that calms us and settles us. That's why we seek other people for comfort sometimes. If you're familiar with Stephen Porges's polyvagal theory, this little piece of data comes from polyvagal theory. So getting back to modifiable factors in our environment, things that we can change. to create more stress resilience and brain health. Diet is a great way to increase stress resilience and brain health. Exercise, sleep health, social engagement and connection, cognitive challenges, and of course, clean air, clean water, clean food, and as we've spoken about, understanding and working with your stress. So I'm going to talk to you about some of those things that I identified that might help with positive neuroplasticity. Gut health, exercise, cognitive training, and sleep. Those are the ones I'll highlight. And I'm going to talk about food now. Isn't that a yummy picture that I just showed you? Isn't that just delicious? So that's beauty and food mixed together. Perfect. My favorite things. So the body and the brain talk to each other all the time. Our gut is our biggest connector to the outside world. And the vagus nerve is one of the main connections between the gut and the brain. The things we absorb from food can be inflammatory, and all stress affects this feedback system. When you don't feel well, often you get a bad stomach ache. When you're really stressed, you often don't want to eat. Those are just two simple examples. Just looking at my time. The gut microbiome, this is really important, provides messages to different parts of the body and communicates with the brain. I was just talking to a patient about probiotics for Parkinson's disease because there's some research that's come out showing that certain probiotics, things that you take orally that change the microbiome of your gut, actually can help some features of Parkinson's disease. Now, again, I'm not making any medical recommendations in this talk. It's just to educate you so you begin to speak to your healthcare provider and you look at the literature so you become more empowered. But yes, the gut communicates with the immune system and also affects the sleep-wake cycle. Permeability in the digestive tract leads to permeability in the blood-brain barrier. There's some evidence that leaky gut causes leaky blood-brain barrier. So a healthy gut and a healthy immune system put you in a good direction towards brain health. Let's first talk about food. Food specifically, and there's data on all of the things that I'm presenting you with, there is data on, and I'm happy to share the references with you later. But eating more plants, focusing on more healthy greens and a variety of healthy greens is very important. Fruits and nuts have the potential to prevent the intestinal inflammation that I was talking to you about and create a healthy gut microbiome. I share with my patients plant-based diets like Whole30 and the Mind diet. You may have been lucky enough to hear some of the other speakers talking about the Mind diet. I'm not sure. The Mind diet is a diet that's been shown to reduce the likelihood of neurodegenerative disease. And there are features of the Mind diet that we recommend to our patients, but it tends to have more carbohydrates than we often recommend to our patients. But again, it's so personal. Speak to your integrative healthcare provider or a nutritionist about this. A higher intake of plants over animal foods, which I said before, and a preference for smash fish. And one of my teachers, Dr. Bredesen, talks about the small fish that are very short-lived, that don't have a chance to accumulate toxins. They haven't accumulated metals. Mackerel, anchovies, sardines, or herring. Avoid gluten. This is an important part of a brain healthy diet. And of course, avoid sugars, simple carbohydrates, and something that's very important is fasting. 12 to 16 hours, depending upon what your genetic makeup is. And that's something you can talk to your healthcare provider about. And I had to put this slide in here. I had to put something about chocolate because there's so many components. There's one main component, but chocolate's actually really good for you as long as it's not laden with sugar. It creates neuroplasticity. There is so much evidence that the flavonoids in chocolate actually can cross the blood-brain barrier, which I think is really, really interesting. They actually change just 8 or 9 grams of chocolate is enough to change brain waves, which I think is an incredible finding. And a little chocolate, and I'm not recommending this, can counteract the effects of, it's not the caffeine. I know some people think it's the caffeine, but the flavonoids too can counteract the effects of a little bit of sleep deprivation. Isn't that interesting? There are several types of exercise that are great for brain health that I like to talk to my patients about. One of those types of exercise is cardio. Very important to do aerobic exercise to stimulate your circulation and oxygenate. There's resistance training you see on this portion of the slide, the upper right. I like slow and low resistance training. Slow and low training is you slow everything down. You use low weights and you really captivate the experience of interoception. And interoception is that being aware of what's happening inside your body while it's happening. And this can be very helpful for positive neuroplasticity. Interoception, slow and low weights. There's complex balance training and high intensity interval training. And with any big exercise change, just talk to your doctor, be responsible, and do your due diligence and make sure that that particular change is good for you. Mostly, don't exercise to lose calories or lose weight. Exercise because it feels good and because you get used to the feeling of what exercise feels like in your body. Great. So a new study shows that there are signals from muscles that protect us from dementia. Muscle exertion, which is a kind of stress, the good stress, creates a protective response that can delay aging in the retina and slow down brain aging. So the stress signals help prevent the buildup of misfolded proteins, which is really amazing. This study's great and may help protect us from Alzheimer's dementia. And I guess the takeaway pearl here for you is that the right kind of stress can protect us from aging and create this positive neuroplasticity, which is an adaptive response. So I just talked to you about physical training, right? But now there's the cognitive training, so brain training. And this is great for inducing neuroplasticity. And cognitive challenges, though, yes, you can do them alone. You don't have to do them on a computer. You can do both. People say to me, should I be doing crossword puzzles? And I say, well, if crossword puzzles are super easy, sure, enjoy them and keep doing them, but also do something new. Do something that your brain and nervous system haven't experienced yet. So allow the cognitive challenges should be difficult and they should be engaging. Use programs like Brain HQ. And the only reason I mention that is because it's very data driven. It has scientific merit and there's so much stuff out there. So be aware and make sure that what you are doing has some scientific merit, or consult with a cognitive trainer so that you can personalize the kind of cognitive training that you're doing for brain health and for positive neuroplasticity. One thing that's great to train is speed of information processing, because speed of information processing has been shown by a few very large studies, one National Institutes of Aging study, to protect against later decline. And speed of information processing is really training how quickly your thoughts happen. Remember, novelty is really important. And speaking of thinking, this is really important. Yes, cognitive training is really important, but there's another aspect of cognition. And it turns out that what we think about really matters. So just notice what we think about really matters. There's a new science showing that repeated negative thinking is linked to an increased risk of dementia. Repeated negative thinking. And in that study, actually, patients who did not have dementia were studied with neuroimaging, and it was shown that they had buildup of amyloid and tau. They didn't have cognitive decline. It was kind of evidence that there was a buildup of these proteins. and gives us some evidence that repeated negative thinking isn't good for mental health or brain health. And it also lets us think about ways we have agency over that. And we can take some control over our negative thinking, especially now in this era right now. And one of the ways to do this is to develop a meditation and mindfulness practice. A Harvard study done by Matt Killingsworth a number of years ago. There were many subjects. He did a beautiful and elegant job. Tens of thousands of subjects, maybe 8,000 or 10,000 subjects. I don't want to exaggerate. But he showed that minds wander. Our minds wander. Almost 50% of the time, we are not choosing what we're thinking about. They're just thoughts, ruminations from the past, thoughts about the future, maybe regrets, maybe resentments. So I think that now more than ever, it's a great opportunity to focus our attention more on appreciating the present moment and building our capacity to be in the present moment, even if it's sometimes challenging. But that's a muscle in itself. That's a cognitive muscle in itself. It turns out it does build attention and concentration. It's good for us to meditate and have mindfulness practices. In the question and answer period, I can go into a whole assortment of different mindfulness practices, like Kundalini yoga practices, kriyas that are good for brain health, mindfulness-based stress reduction. But for right now, I just want to talk to you about two components that we need for brain health, and that is intention, to really study what we're talking about, study what we're thinking about, and then attention, paying attention to what it is we want to be thinking about. Meditation increases gray matter in the brain, calms down the amygdala, the alarm center. It slows brain aging. It's a good thing. It increases the gyri of our brain and the size of our hippocampus. So I'm going to just invite you, how about we just take 1 minute, actually 30 or 40 seconds, to do a practice right now. I'm going to invite you to just pause in this moment right now and do an exercise with me. Settle into the chair that you're in, the seat that you're in, the sofa that you're on, and even if you're walking, just settle in. If you're driving, probably don't do this. Settle in. Notice a big, full exhale. Notice what you feel as you just watch your breath. Settle into that breath. Settle into your chair or your seat. Notice where you feel the weight of your body. Appreciate the contact points. Just for 1 minute, take a look at your hands. Palms up. Look at your hands, the palms, as though you've never seen them before. With appreciation for their unique and very interesting lines. Notice the different places where there might be a little pink, where you might see the blue of veins. Notice where your hands have been, what they've touched, food they've made, work they've done. And just take about 10 more seconds to appreciate your hands and pay full attention to how wonderful they are. And I'll be quiet. So that was about a 30-second exercise. You can stop looking at your hands now Just notice if you feel any more present in this moment with me, with yourself. And notice that that was a very short time out of this talk to just be present with your hands. And it can really, you can choose anything of interest or of beauty. And then there's yoga and the movements, all of the different movements and embodied exercises like Qigong Tai Chi that you can do that relieve trauma, decrease stress, just like dancing and shaking do. They have a mindfulness component that allow us to go back to that word of interoception, feeling what's happening on the inside of our bodies. And they have the added benefit of positive neuroplasticity, right? Increasing brain volume, hippocampal volume, and improving cognitive skills like memory, attention, and focus. So very worthwhile to engage in some of these activities. I'm going to show you a super cute picture here. This is kind of like local news that I'm sharing with you. How many of you have trouble sleeping? I can't see your hands, but that's right. I'm sure there are many of you. This is a picture from a local farm in North Boulder that my daughter took. And you cannot hear this sow, but she is snoring so loudly. And sleep is so critically important. Deep sleep is so critically important. There's a new study showing that midlife, short sleep duration of less than 6 hours. So if you're in your 50s and you're sleeping for less than 6 hours, it does put you at an increased risk for dementia significantly by about 30%. Now's the best time to start focusing on sleep and maximizing sleep. If you might snore, you might suspect that you have sleep apnea, or just if you have cognitive decline, it is so worthwhile to talk to your healthcare provider about screening for sleep apnea. We want to be oxygenating all the time, but especially while we sleep. So you might need a CPAP machine, but it's certainly worth to inquire and see whether or not you want your sleep monitored. During sleep, very many wonderful things happen. We have a glymphatic system in our brain that clears toxins while we sleep, particularly a kind of slow wave or deep sleep. We want to be keeping that system active with active rest. We want to be dreaming. We do many things during the night. We consolidate memories. We work out issues in our dreams. We rehearse the day in our dreams. And all of those are good for positive neuroplasticity. Some pearls here that are takeaways for you are keep your room cool and dark. No blue light at night. Exercise earlier in the day. Stimulants aren't good before bed or in the afternoon, like coffee. Wake up at the same time each day. Seems to be really important with a big, bright burst of sunlight before 11 in the morning. That seems to be really good for readjusting a circadian rhythm. And what I like to recommend to my patients as well is to have a worry journal next to your bed. While you're brushing your teeth, you're thinking about having a really clean mouth and not having any bacteria in your mouth, which is also not good for brain health. Some of these bacteria are not good for brain health. You're also wanting to make sure before bed that you're writing down your worries of the day, those things that you really don't want to take to bed with you, things you might want some relief from. And you can write those things down in a worry journal and promise yourself you'll deal with it the next morning when you wake up, but allow yourself to feel a little bit of relief at night by writing those things in a worry journal. And that's sleep. And we've spoken about sleep and gut health and stress resilience. And what I noticed as I was preparing this presentation is that the habits of stress resilient people are really similar to the habits of brain healthy people, those looking to prevent cognitive decline and have brain health. That's a consistent sleep schedule. Both resilient and brain healthy people are moving a lot, and grooving, enjoying their movement. They're working with difficult feelings like fear and shame. They're working with grief or sadness and not carrying it as a burden. And working with old traumas that sometimes set us up for difficult feelings moving forward. We want to clear as many of those as we can for the health of our nervous system. Stress resilient and brain healthy people are eating a lot of plants and have a healthy gut microbiome. They're working on gratitude and positivity habits, like waking up in the morning, and even if you have pain, even if you're afraid, just having the ability, courage, capacity to allow one positive thing in, something you appreciate. Spirituality or connection to something bigger than you, bigger than me. Something meaningful, something that connects you, a sense of purpose. It doesn't have to be religion. It could be nature. It could be the gorgeous, expansive, eternal God that you love. It could be really anything that connects you to that trust beyond you, or just the ability to be still and have a mindfulness practice and be still and appreciate the present moment. And those are the take homes. You can read them on your own. You can develop your positive neuroplasticity. You can redefine some stressors as challenges. Many of these lifestyle modifications are Alzheimer's prevention strategies, and building resilience is really key. Perceiving stress maybe in a new way, and knowing how to calm the nervous system is great for brain health. We become resilient and brain healthy, not by avoiding our stress, but by leaning into it and facing some discomfort and being able to move through it and feel safe on the other side, hopefully. We become resilient by choosing to take on challenges rather than trying to avoid them, even small ones. So I just want to thank you for that wonderful talk. That ends the formal presentation. You'll see the name of our clinic. You'll see me being a rascal and not having my mask on for the photo for those 10 seconds. I apologize. I do a healthy brain checkup. We do neuropsychological testing with the neuropsychologists at our clinic, cognitive training. We're Bredesen trained, many of us, and we do trauma and resilience psychotherapy. So thank you very much. And I am going to look forward to questions and answers now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Rusk, for your presentation today.
Such
I know, especially in the pandemic and the last year, like you mentioned, that we've had, it's so important to take care of, your brain health, your, mental health. So that being said, I'm just going to go ahead and jump right into our questions. We did have some come in during your presentation.
Good.
So you talked a little bit about, the diets and those kinds of things that can aid in neuroplasticity. So what could you just talk a little bit about what does a leaky gut actually mean as far as that reference that you made?
Can you see it means that there are junctures in the gut. Whoops, can you see my screen right now?
No, I just see you right now.
Oh, okay, good, because I want to pull, that's okay. I'm going to actually pull something up for the group. Are you able to see my screen now? Probably not, and that's totally fine. But I guess I want to explain how this works. Lipopolysaccharides leak into the bloodstream from a leaky gut. So it means that there are junctures in the gut that are big. And usually, just like we have a blood-brain barrier, we have a gut-body barrier. And when we're not healthy, or we've been inflamed for a long time, or we've been eating foods that have really not worked for our bodies for whatever reason, or where there's a lot of stress, we have junctures in that gut lining. And so things cross through and can create a trigger for cytokines. And I think most people know a little bit about cytokines just from COVID. And cytokines create systemic inflammation, which can increase permeability. So Lyme disease, maybe COVID, I'm not sure, mold, there are things that can increase blood-brain permeability and actually affect sleep and affect mental health like depression and anxiety. So that's a long answer, and people are able to look into it a little bit more. Good question.
Yeah. And so to kind of piggyback off of the diet, somebody else had a question in regards to hydration. So what do you think about good hydration for good brain health? Is there
Oh,
anything that supports that?
there's some really nice data showing that if you are even a little dehydrated, and I'm going to encourage everyone to take a drink right now, because maybe you haven't. I
That's
haven't, so
great.
I will. But there's actually, I've seen 1 or 2 studies showing that suboptimal hydration can decrease cognitive agility, cognitive strength. So our memory can be affected by lack of hydration. Great question.
I know that I've heard before, don't wait until you're necessarily
Thirsty.
parched or thirsty. Yeah, you should kind
Keep
of,
it up.
yes.
So
Keep
I
it up.
have to tell our community the cutest little app that my daughter has.
Yeah.
It's an app that's something like called Plant Water Me. It might be called Water Me. And it's a reminder to drink. It's a little plant. Every time you take a drink, you press a button and it lets you know if you've really had enough water to drink in a certain 8-hour or 9-hour period. So
Oh
if
my
you need
God.
a reminder, just do it on the top of the hour every half an hour.
Yeah.
Thank you for that question.
Yeah, that was a great question. So we did, oh, sorry, keep going.
I also want to talk about hearing loss. It's very, very important. It was beyond the scope of this conversation, but midlife hearing loss, just like sleep difficulties, these are low hanging fruit, Lindsay. So I know there's some audiologists that sponsor this Aging at Altitude. Hearing loss in midlife very much affects cognition and brain health and can decrease, that can cause negative neuroplasticity. If we're not hearing, our brain does not get signals it needs. So check that out too for brain
Great.
health.
See, that was perfect. You actually led right into the next person's question. So no worries, you were on top of it.
Good.
So, okay, I did want to ask too, just kind of your opinions, your recommendations, neuroplasticity, new experiences. With the pandemic and with people kind of staying at home, safer at home, all of that kind of stuff, instead of
Absolutely.
going out and about or joining, a club or, some physical fitness classes, is there anything you recommend that people can do at home to still get those new experiences?
So happy you asked. People ask me that every day, and I'm so happy to say that I'm sending my patients Qigong videos from the University of Toronto, and I'm actually putting together a Qigong class with a friend and colleague of mine soon that'll just be a public Zoom class. So, yes, first of all, you can do cognitive training at home. You can have yoga classes at home. If you want me to provide our community with some resources, I can do that later on. But I recommend that you kind of create a nice routine throughout the day. Spend as much time safely outside with masks on if that's what you need to do, or masks off. Most of this community is a Colorado community. Be in nature. There's so much evidence that nature is pro-positive neuroplasticity. So spend some time in nature. And yes, there's tons that you can do at home. Qigong, Tai Chi, Kundalini, some of the Kundalini practices for brain health are, if your audience want to write this down, Sa, Ta, Na, Ma, 4 syllables. It's a Kundalini yoga practice, and there's good evidence that it supports brain health. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exercise videos.
Yeah, that's what I was going to
Tons.
say. I know there's lots on YouTube.
Tons. I'm happy to help.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
welcome to contact you're welcome to contact our office, and I'm more than happy to just provide resources to people.
Absolutely.
I'll post them on my website, IleneNaomiRusk.com.
Okay.
I'll post them on my website, and I have free brain healthy tips that you can do at home
Even
on
better.
my website too, by
Yes,
the way.
absolutely. I know those, they say that, yeah, just a quick YouTube search I know helps. And a lot of that stuff is free. And so, especially in the last year with the pandemic.
It is. People are being so, I find people are being so incredibly generous right now. Doesn't it just open your heart right up?
I love it. Yeah.
So
And
again, one
another
of the,
positivity thing too,
I
right?
know, generous and caring. Let's
Yes.
cultivate that compassion and
Yes.
also the self-compassion that we need for ourselves, because
Mhm.
we have been kind of in a soup of change and
Yeah,
unpredictability.
absolutely.
I actually got a question from someone said, what is your website again? It's IleneNaomiRusk.com or healthybrain.clinic. Some questions are popping up for me, by the way, Lindsay.
Oh, good. Yeah, we see the same one, so no worries.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah, so our next one, you mentioned gyri. Did I say that right? In the brain?
Yes. Yes.
What exactly is that?
Oh, okay. Did you mean a worry journal or diary? I'm
No,
not sure.
it was GYRI when you had that
Oh,
slide.
gyri.
Oh,
Oh, I love. Oh, I
sorry,
love
I
that.
butchered that.
Oh no, I did. Sorry. It's GYRUS is a gyrus. And it's if you've ever seen and I can't pull up a picture right now for the audience, it's those curves and folds. It's the most evolved cortical part of the brain that has uh, ridges and mountains. I think that you've seen a picture of the brain. That's
Mhm.
what a gyrus is.
Okay, great.
And that's just the plural of it. Thanks for asking.
Yeah. Um, okay, and then this next question. So I know you touched a little bit on eating the fish and the seafood that hasn't had a lot of time to build up any bacteria, metals. So is that the same for organic produce versus just the non-organic?
I'm so happy that you're asking that question. How we take care of the land and how we take care of our food
Mhm.
is directly related to how we're taking care of our bodies. I see it as this continuous, like infinity sign. So, yes, when the earth is healthy and they are not genetically modified foods and they are not sprayed with things that are not good for human bodies, that is what's good for the gut and that is what's good for the brain.
Mhm.
Glyphosate has been very implicated in the poverty of um, uh, good a good gut microbiome and not good for brain health either. So thanks for that question around eating organic food.
And then I had another question too. Does neuroplasticity have any role in addiction recovery?
Oh, I love that question. Yeah, it's so not what I spoke about today, but it's still so relevant. Absolutely. You
Mhm.
know, all of the things that I mentioned, pro-social behavior, and maybe most importantly, stress regulation, in addition to a lot of social support, healthy gut,
Mhm.
has to do with the regulation of our nervous system, because addictions have so much to do with old traumas, adverse childhood experiences, and ways in which we adapt to difficulty.
Right.
So, dealing with dysregulation in the nervous system and many of the other things that we talked about for resilience are very beneficial for addictions as well.
Which is so comforting, I know.
Right? Thanks for asking that
Yeah,
question. Completely off topic, but I love it.
yeah, and not even to be negative, right? To turn it to the positive.
Thank
Can
you.
these types of things
That's
help with
right.
something negative, right?
Exactly right.
And I think Dr. Rusk, okay, so we have our next question. And I don't know if you have the ability to see it too, just because I don't want to mess up the pronunciation. But this person says, what about PS as a supplement for brain health. It's phos.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I see a question. Do you have any new information on PSP CBD? Avoidable if in the family. Okay, so PSP, if this is what the community member is asking about, is progressive supranuclear palsy. CBD, I think, is CBD as we know it is one of the cannabinoids. So I guess I don't really understand the question, but I do know that PSP is a neurodegenerative disease that will benefit. Oh, phosphatidylserine. Oh, that's another question. Sorry. So in terms of PSP, if the question is about progressive supranuclear palsy, very important to have a good integrative neurologist on board. Again, we're seeing incredible changes in people who have degenerative illnesses or are wanting to prevent degenerative illnesses. PSP is a neurodegenerative illness. If the question is also about CBD, then there's a lot of evidence now that CBD is wonderful for brain health, for Alzheimer's disease as well. Again, if people want more information on dosing, I could probably get some resources, but doses and sourcing are very important for the cannabinoids. So just know what you're doing and do a little research before you. And again, I do not believe in the single solitary silver bullet targeted strategy. We want to think simple. We have to think whole health, whole life, whole delight, and deal with many root causes.
Good, great. Well, oh my gosh, thank you so much for your time today.
Pleasure.
I know it's already 1:00, so if there are any questions for the audience that we weren't able to get to, that you wanted a little bit more information on, feel free to send either Dr. Rusk or myself an email, and we'll absolutely do what we can to get those answered for you. We also are recording today's webinar, so we will post the recorded video on our website so that whether you wanted to view this again or you wanted to share it with anybody who you think would benefit from this information, you absolutely can. It's going to be on dailycamera.com/aging. You'll just click on the webinar series button, and then it'll take you right to where you can either register for more this week, or you can see the past ones and then today's as well. So I did want to make sure everybody knew that. But yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Rusk. I wanted to turn it over to you just to make any closing remarks before we finish up.
I'm very grateful to you and for organizing this and providing wonderful resources generously to the community to empower us to be a really healthy and brain-wise community. And I left out a slide that I'm going to put on my website. It's 6 ways to calm the nervous system. And instead of pulling it all up now, I'm just going to put it on IleneNaomiRusk.com. It's the only way I know how to do it, but it was my last slide and it might be helpful for your audience, or you can send it around.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, good. Thanks, Lindsay. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, everyone. We will see you tomorrow, same time, same channel.